Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Legacy Podcast. This is your host, Jackie Ma. And today I'm really excited to bring on a dear sister, Melanie Ryan, who is a psychotherapist, shamanic practitioner, and the founder of the Golden Shadow Method. So, without further ado, welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much. So good to be here with you, Ma. And
So
I
good.
want to say hello to your audience. Hello, everyone. Really happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. I'm looking forward to dive in today. As you know, have been watching the work and you just came out with your second book, but I want to talk first a little bit about who you are and what are you doing? How did this all come to be and what's going on? So psychotherapy first.
Yeah. It's always complicated what comes after who am I, right?
Yeah.
I am a soul traveling through time and space. That's really what I am. So in this lifetime, I'm called Melanie Ryan.
Yes.
And I did start off as a psychotherapist, traditionally trained. And I always wanted to help people ever since I was very young. And I had a very traditional start, although I was always very interested in nature and mysticism. Like I secretly, as a teenager, was studying palm reading and tarot cards in my bedroom and didn't tell anyone, what I was doing, maybe a couple of friends. But, we keep that part of us secret, right? And we kind of store that away because we don't really see that happening in society too much, not where I grew up in New York. So I went down the traditional path of helping people as a psychotherapist. And I did that for probably about a decade until I had a spiritual awakening. And that really opened the doors to spirituality, which doesn't really have so much structure to it. Like you don't go to a university per se, right? You have to really kind of find your way with spirituality, and you find, different people. The universe sort of brings you different people, and it brings out what's hidden inside of you. So the golden shadow method actually is about the golden shadow, which is what's hidden inside of you that is bright and beautiful and creative and intuitive, and our natural, powers to heal ourselves, and all of the magic that we put aside because if we really own it, we're afraid of being called crazy or being ostracized in some way or judged. And so the method really came out of my life experience of owning my gold, owning my magic.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So now I guess because we kind of just segued in. So you wrote a book called The
Mm-hmm.
Golden Shadow Method.
Yes.
And that's the first book, and that book is behind you.
Yes. This is my okay, and it's leaning up against Carl Jung's books.
Perfect.
There's a
Of
reason
course.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my first book baby, I call it. And I wrote this actually, it was coming to me probably for about 7 years. I am a Buddhist and a Buddhist teacher. I teach meditation and Dharma. And I also studied shamanism for both of them side by side, Buddhism and shamanism, for about 15 years until I became a teacher in both of those spiritual traditions. And then Carl Jung, I'm a psychotherapist. I studied some Carl Jung in college, but it really just kind of swept over that real quick. And he found me later when
Yeah.
I decided to write a book on the shadow, because shadow work is really in the Golden Shadow Method. I teach how shadow work is actually done in on the Buddhist path and also in shamanic work. But Jung was like, "Hey, if you're going to write a book on the shadow, you better include me."
Yeah.
So I did a lot of meditating and shamanic journeying and just being in nature and finding the stillness and the silence. And that was when Jung kind of popped in right before I started writing the Golden Shadow Method. And so there's three pillars to the method. It's actually a 2-year program. The first year is the three pillars, which is Jung in the shadow, which goes into the techniques, Jungian psychology,
Mhm.
of how Jung used various techniques of going into the unconscious. And so I should just say that the shadow is really just a common term for what you're not aware of, what we store in the unconscious. And so Jung in the Shadow goes into working with archetypes. It goes into working with triggers and what's called shadow projection, how we are constantly projecting out the unconscious onto our world, and things are manifesting to actually reflect back to us what's hidden inside of us.
For sure.
So, so Jung in the Shadow really gets into that, and it's a 3-month immersion online. And there's 6 workshops, and in between, life happens. So there's usually a couple of weeks in between each workshop, and things are happening and stirring up the shadow. And so it all starts to come out in the process, and it's a cleaning out of the psyche. The psyche, we compartmentalize. We have all of these compartments, just like we have boxes in the basement or boxes in the attic, right?
Yeah.
So the psyche does the same thing. We box things up, and basically it's an unpacking and clearing out of the psyche. And so then we have usually about 6 weeks off of integration, because after doing that big cleanup job, you have to rest.
Yeah.
Right? Just like spring cleaning with your house, it's like you just go through everything and then you're like, oh, you're exhausted. When we work with the unconscious, it can be exhausting. So we rest, and then we go into Buddha and the Shadow, which is another about a 3-month immersion again, where I teach a particular kind of Buddhist meditation called shamatha. And shamatha is a particular kind of meditation that brings the unconscious into awareness. So again, it's another bridge from the unconscious into the conscious mind. And so I teach, a lot of Buddhist Dharma in that. And then we do practice. And then there's independent study in between again. And then when that's done, we take 6 weeks off and we go into shaman in the shadow. And that's all the shamanic tools of working with spiritual guides, doing shamanic journeying, working with earth medicine, crystals, stones,
Mhm.
fire ceremonies, things like that. And we start to clear out the psyche through the shamanic work, which a lot of people prefer that because, shamanic journeying, working with your, what's my power animal? And,
Yeah.
everybody wants to know, and it's fun. Those are what Jung actually would call the archetypes. And so throughout the year, I start to help people connect the dots that all spiritual traditions are really saying the same thing.
Mhm.
So, what shamans call like spirit guides and spirit animals, Jung would call those archetypes,
That's
right?
exactly.
Those are really represents primordial images that represent energies that actually live inside of you.
Mhm.
So you already possess those qualities, but your power animals and your spiritual guides bring them out of you to help you see what you couldn't see before, to make the unconscious conscious. And so there's a lot of connection to nature, though, in shamanism that you don't get in like Jung in the Shadow, because Jung was, he was a doctor, so it was very clinical.
Mhm.
We changed a lot of the terminology from shamanism and Buddhism into more clinical terms that could be more accessible to, that field, the psychology field. But it's really all saying the same thing. So,
What I like so much about this is one, for the times that we're in, these, as ancient wisdom carriers from other times coming now, I find more and more in my client base, and obviously me, you, we are very rich and nuanced in our textures and our lineages. And so it's really beautiful to honor and represent the full spectrum of who we are. Like it really isn't just one house. It's like all this like divine all the lineages that we have, embodied throughout time. So I really love to see that it's not a rigid structure with you. You get to really bring in and encompass the full spectrum of all of it because there is a place for all of it inside of you.
Mhm.
And there's a power in a medicine for all of the full bandwidth of people are going to come for different things, right?
Mhm.
Somebody's going to come through that has a direct link with shamanism with you, and they're going to be able to really, really nurture in that part of the house and open up to something else. So, like, just this full dynamic expression of who we are feels really important. It's like it's not just one or the other, it's everything, and honoring all the voices and the medicines that we carry. So that's beautiful that you have those three different um, parts of you represented in your book. That's yummy.
Yeah, we're all bringing forward our karma, right? Like what we've been in past lives and why we're manifesting into who we are in this life and what we're drawn to. And there
Mm,
was a part of me that really wanted to make all three pillars like a requirement, or, you had to do Jung before you had to do this, or you had to do that. And then I kind of checked my ego and was like, why are you trying to control? Just let people come in and do what they want to do. If they want to come in at shaman in the shadow, let them. If that's all they want to take, great.
yeah.
It's something.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, believe it or not, a lot of students skip over Buddha and the shadow. And so that it's very hard for people to sit in silence and in
Yeah.
stillness. And there's a lot of undoing of what people think meditation is, because
Yes.
meditation is really sold, as another form of, a way to escape and bliss out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or just to relax, which is very beneficial, but
Absolutely.
relaxing is not meditating, because meditation in the Buddhist path, the Buddha, it's about enlightenment. It's about awakening consciousness. So the shamatha meditation that I teach is actually an open eye technique. And a lot of people come in and, they've been doing other types of meditation for many years, sometimes 30, 40 years, and now they're being asked to open their eyes. And I say, well, shadow work, the reason why I teach this as shadow work is because it's not about closing anything off. We're
Mm-hmm.
not shutting down any of our senses. We're actually really learning how to be here.
Yeah.
And so to make all of life a meditation, we have to start with sitting still and silent and with our eyes open. And it's the opening of the eyes that really brings the shadow into consciousness. Because all you're doing is just sitting and breathing. And then a whole bunch starts to happen as a result of just trying to surrender to just sitting and breathing and doing nothing.
Yeah.
So there's no distraction. It's a very direct experience of one's mind. We become the observer of our mind. And what we see sometimes can be very golden. We can get very creative. And as we're sitting, just all of a sudden have an amazing vision or idea or some, other kind of creative energy flow through us that we can then manifest. And then we can also have some dark shadow stuff. All of a sudden, a memory comes up of a trauma. All kinds of things can happen. Sometimes we can get bored and we're sitting there and we're just thinking about, like, oh, what am I going to make for dinner?
Yeah.
And we run through our list of things to do. And then the mind starts to go through its normal, chitter chatter. And then there's open space. It starts to open up after a period of time. And that's the space when I tell my students, that's where spirit is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you learn to let go of your mind.
Yeah.
Mind is what complicates everything. We get all into our stories,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of negative stories. For me, I suffered from panic attacks, in my early 20s. And I had a lot of fear and I had a lot of self doubt and I had a lot of self aggression. And when I sat and I signed up for meditation, and for me, it was full weekends. We had to sit for hours and we would alternate sitting and walking meditation. Thank God for the walking part.
Yeah.
But I had such a hard time being with myself. I was ready to just freaking go batshit. Am I allowed to curse?
You can.
Oh, okay.
This is the liberated space.
I mean, I was ready to friggin' lose it. Like lose it big time. I would try and escape and I would go to the bathroom like 10 times in a day
Yeah.
just to get out of the room, to get away from my mind. Because
Mm,
what I was experiencing was just all of my fears, everything was just like crashing open into awareness. But then you're supported by a meditation instructor. So you would get pulled out and have these interviews with a senior
yeah.
teacher, and they would say, you know, how you doing? I'd be like, I'm doing
Uh,
great. I hate myself, you know, and I started to see all of it, but you know, we have to see it in order to heal it, right? And then we have to feel it in order to heal it.
yeah.
So a lot comes up and out. So shamatha meditation, I teach, again, it's a cleaning out of the psyche. You're cleaning out and you're starting to observe your mind and all the things that you tell yourself of like, oh, I can't do that. Or, you know, we talk ourselves out of such amazing things.
I know.
It's amazing how we can totally sabotage ourselves. So with that direct experience, it's so transformational. And I
Mhm.
have to always bite my tongue when a student decides to skip over Buddha and the shadow because they're just not ready. They're just not ready to be with themselves yet. Or, you know, maybe they were a Buddhist in a past life and they got burned and, you know, who knows, you know, we have all of our reasons why we don't really step into our power and really face ourselves. So I've had to learn to keep my mouth shut and not try and convince my students to like, oh, please take Buddha in the shadow. It's like one of the best pillars.
Yeah.
So, but they do have to take Buddha and the shadow, and they do have to take all three pillars to go into the year 2 program, which is called The Secrets of the Golden Shadow, which is the name of my next book that's coming out sometime either spring or I don't know. I keep getting more from spirit for this book. It's like
Mhm.
driving me crazy. I think
Amazing.
I'm done. And then something else comes in, and I'm like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
But it's such a juicy, yummy book that's coming. And so in the meantime, to keep my audience from, you know, going crazy, I released Transmuting Triggers, which is part of the next book coming up. But this is actually a workbook. This isn't like a book. This is a workbook and a journal. And it's also a creative space. There's a page that's just for drawings and poems
Mm,
as part of the journal. Like one side is journaling and then the other side is blank, so that you can work with wounded parts of yourself. And so the transmuting triggers protocol is part of my work with shadow projection. So not everyone understands shadow projection. You know, this is
speak
a
into it a little bit.
Jungian, it's a Jungian concept that I didn't even really grasp until I really started to dive in and studied Jungian psychology. Um, so the shadow is the unconscious, right? What we do is we project the unconscious out into the world, like on a movie screen, and then it's reflected back to us like a mirror.
Mhm.
So everything that's happening, everything that's manifesting in our life is actually a shadow projection. It can be something positive, like I found several mentors who were golden shadow projections of me,
Yeah.
people who helped me to remember who I am. And there was a reason why I was attracted to them, because the energy that they are carrying, I also had.
Mhm.
And that's what made me drawn to them. So I call that a golden shadow projection, right? And so you're really drawn to someone like, oh, I have to take that course, or oh, I really have to talk to that person, or I really admire, you know, so and so for, you know, their ability to paint or dance or whatever it is, right? So we get really excited about golden shadow projections because it's bringing up, you know, what we really love.
Yeah, it's bringing us closer to us.
However, we can get scared of our golden shadow projections too. You know, so there are a lot of people who aren't quite ready to work with me. They're like, "Oh, I'm a little scared of Melanie," because of what I remind them of that they have in themselves, that they're not really quite ready to own yet. And by being with me, it reminds them of that. And this is happening unconsciously.
Everywhere, yes.
So, and then we have dark shadow projection, which is so say, I just had it happen this morning. A student of mine who had an abusive father, and she was at work, and there was two people at work that became like bullies toward her. And so I was explaining, okay, they are shadow projections of your father, and they are there to help you connect to the wounded version of yourself that needs to be healed, which
Mhm.
was her 4-year old. So in transmuting triggers, we start to understand that we're getting triggered with golden shadow projections and dark shadow projections. Hold on one sec. And that it's all happening to awaken us. Sometimes it feels good. Sometimes it feels really scary and
Mhm.
not so good. So people oftentimes think of a trigger as something that creates discomfort or pain. But I also say that no, we can get triggered like when we're like, yeah,
Yeah.
we get
Yep.
all giddy, you know, we can get triggered because something positive from the golden shadow is coming into consciousness. And so when we start to realize that our unconscious is getting projected out into the world and reflected back to us, and we can get either excited or upset over it, we're not really caught up in the external. We start to go in and we start to realize, why am I so excited about this? Why do I get so happy when I talk about shamanism?
Mhm.
Or, why do I get so afraid of speaking my truth to someone who's a bully? So we get really curious about all of it as a reflection of us, who we are that we're not conscious of.
Which brings so much power back home because then you're no longer looking outside as though everything is happening to you and everything is now happening for you. And that you are the
Exactly.
one that is co creating and actually creating the entire blueprint of all the shadow networks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the whole point of shadow work is to transmute any darkness into light. But in my method, I split the shadow into two, which, there's no such thing as duality really.
Mhm.
But I split the shadow into two to make a point to people. It's really important for people to understand. Carl Jung coined the term the shadow, and he said that the shadow was the entire unconscious, including the positive shadow.
Mhm.
So it's referred to as the positive shadow, the light shadow, or the golden shadow. But we also are, as alchemists, which are what Jungians often, talk about, is alchemy, which is transforming energy, transmuting energy from dark into light or lead into gold.
Mhm.
So we are talking about how the dark shadow also is golden, because what comes out of our trauma, and my next book, The Secrets of the Golden Shadow, is ancestral wisdom for healing and transcending trauma. And it goes deeper into the dark shadow and the meaning and the purpose of trauma in our life, and how it is actually there. It has a purpose. It's not happening by accident.
Yeah.
There's no coincidence. Pain is there to not just awaken us, but to also bring us together,
Mhm.
right? We've all heard of like trauma bonds,
Yeah.
right? So trauma actually creates community. It can bring us together, and it awakens what's called bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakened, and chitta means heart and mind. It awakens bodhicitta, which is compassion and wisdom and love for each other. So we have a hard time accepting that there's trauma, that it's part of the fabric of life. We
Mhm.
want to kind of do it our way and make it all love and light.
Yeah. I want to add in here something that feels really relevant for me personally in looking at the
Mhm.
collective field and um, what is coming up as far as there's a big rise right now in conversations around trauma, somatic therapy. There's like a whole new marketplace of trauma informed um, yeah, a market. It's a whole consciousness opened up, right, for us to become more aware that trauma exists, which is really beautiful. And at the same time, there is still this, in my understanding, it's still in an elementary phase, a little bit feeble, in that it's more like it's happening to you instead of it's happening for you. Like it hasn't reached an empowered birthing stage yet, where it's like, okay, we can resolve trauma and it's you're not victimized by it. It's actually part of the soul's journey, and this is really important to acknowledge for you to actually be empowered and healing yourself, besides purporting more and more victimization on this planet. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of shadow, a lot of unconscious behavior and energetics that I think we're still in a morphing, a birthing phase of evolution with that whole field, that is on the planet. So I really like and agree with you that although trauma can be very, very challenging, we are here in bodies with past life expressions and a full spectrum of experience that we're able to contend with. Like we really can be brought together, we can heal, we can be empowered. And there's so many different methods and ways in which each one will be called to assert oneself in their own healing journey.
With the pandemic, right? it A lot of shadow stuff came up from the collective unconscious, right? Like all of these groups want to be heard, and all of this trauma from our ancestors and previous generations and my grandmother and my great grandmother and so on and so on. I mean, we've had so much trauma during this dark time of like the last 2000, 3000 years,
Yeah.
right? So the trauma is been swept under the rug,
Mhm.
right? And so what happens is what's called a shadow effect, where all the shit is now flying out.
Yep.
Everything that grandma and grandpa swept under the rug, everything that mom and dad swept under the rug, everything that you have been sweeping under the rug,
Mhm.
everything that your past life swept under the rug. Past life. Did I say wife?
Her too.
Your past life, so it's just everything is energy, and it's all coming up and out like this volcanic eruption, right? That we can thank COVID for. And then we all got locked down and we all had to go to our room and go and be like monks and sit in a cave,
Yeah.
and contemplate things, you know and so everyone does need to be trauma informed right now.
Yep.
Everyone, not just professionals, every single person, because trauma is universal. And so, if we don't want to pass trauma down to our children, then we have to take it upon ourselves to learn about how to heal our trauma and transmute that.
Mm.
And that's why I'm saying, like, hey, if you've been triggered in the last 3 years, you need to come and talk to me and learn how to transmute your triggers and what they are telling you, what the message is. And so there's always going to be people who are afraid of embracing their power and want to be a victim,
Mhm.
right? Because that's their way of being taken care of, and that's the way that they feel
Absolutely.
loved. But the message, right, as ancient wisdom holders, as bringing forward what the ancestors have been saying for as long as we know, is that we know we're not victims,
That's
right?
right.
And that's where I love the story of the hero's journey. The hero's journey is we're all a hero. We're
Mhm.
all, this is the game of life. We're all here to learn how to be a hero. And there's stages of the hero's journey, and one of them is the initiation stage. You know, we're here to confront adversity. It's never going to be all love and light.
Yeah.
Adversity is what helps us to grow. We need that kind of tension of the opposites, like the yin and the yang.
Mhm.
And in Mayan cosmology, it's the Hunab Ku. There's all these symbols of how the dark and light hold hands. They are working together. There's a tension, but there's also a unity. And that's why my next book is also not just about healing, but how to transcend.
Beautiful.
To really transcend to a higher level of consciousness, we have to understand the design, that there's a reason why there's adversity. There's a reason why there's trauma. It does all have meaning and purpose for us.
So
And so even a tree, has adversity. A tree blows and, the wind blows, and what happens as a result of that? The tree grows stronger roots.
yeah.
So adversity is there to help us grow. And so if we're afraid of our power, which I think for a lot of people, they chose to be victims in this life. That's like a soul contract.
Yep, and also life is young. I mean, there's timelines. I mean,
Yeah.
just if 5, 10 years from now, I mean, just the fact what we're seeing collectively, the rise of, I mean, that even these fields are now so prevalent, that are more mainstream, that are like opening things up. And now you see um, eh, plant medicines all over. I mean, there's good and there's bad in that, like all of this, right? That things that were more dedicated to the privacy of shamanic cultures in the woods are now mainstream, and scientists are studying them and talking about it. It's like it's a really incredible time right now.
Oh yeah. With quantum physics and quantum science,
Yeah,
shamans already knew all of that.
absolutely. I tend to still lean towards the ancient. I'm like a little bit. Mm, thanks, science. I appreciate you, and I know that you're part of the progression. However, we knew this.
Right.
You're just catching up, but it's great you're catching up.
It is great. It's
Yeah,
very exciting. And, again, we have to look at what do we want? What are
what's
we getting excited about the fact that they're catching up? Right. So I always have to check my ego and say, there's always going to be adversity.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
always going to be someone who's going to have an argument. There's always going to be someone who's playing the opposite,
Hmm.
because that's how this universe is designed.
Yes.
And I have to catch myself like, oh, yay, more people are waking up. And it was like, wait a minute, Melanie, like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
About, do you think that there can be an enlightened society here on Earth? And I say here on Earth for a reason. I do believe that there are enlightened societies in other dimensions,
Absolutely.
right?
We're in other dimensions.
And I do believe that there are different dimensions here on Earth too, as far as your level of consciousness. Like groups gather with each other based on the level of consciousness of,
Yes.
their karma, where their experiences as a soul. And we get drawn to each other based on, oh, wait, what I know. Okay, you want to hang out with you,
Yeah.
but we do want to get outside our little consciousness bubbles, these dimensions that we float through time and space here on Earth, and interact with other people who think differently,
Hmm.
and be very open and curious about, like, like, tell me more about that,
Yeah.
you know and we may not agree, you know but that's what we're here for. We're here to sort of swim in all of these different experiences of bumping up against different levels of consciousness, and what that does for us, as far as awaken us. And so I personally don't believe that that is the reason for planet Earth. I think that we're here to have this bumping up against each
Yeah.
other, you know. And yes, we do get excited when someone wakes up and we feel like they've reclaimed their power, and it's very
Mhm.
exciting. But I also have to keep reminding myself that it's not going to be an enlightened society here. And that's not bad news. That's the thing.
Yeah. I hear
But
you.
then we get
Same.
into the good or bad.
Yeah,
We fall into
absolutely.
good and bad, which is another duality. We
Mhm.
have to understand, see from a really eagle eye perspective, that it's all happening for us, even the uncomfortable, painful stuff. That's a really hard pill to swallow, right?
That is a really hard pill to swallow. And as you said, it's a consistent peering into all of the identities and structures of like who has an agenda, what, what are the thought forms and the beliefs that each part of us could be holding at any time. And yeah, it's very revealing consistently. Lots of curiosity because
Yeah.
there's so much.
Well, and it's, and this is a result probably mostly of my Buddhist practice of taking a step back and unhooking,
Yeah.
detaching, right? The Buddha taught non-attachment.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean you don't care, right? You're very passionate about what you're doing. I'm very passionate about my work. You're very passionate
Yeah.
about your work. And, I definitely have strong beliefs,
Yeah.
but then I recognize that I'm probably like, maybe among like 5 to 10% of the planet that have the
Yeah.
same beliefs that I have.
Yep.
you know
I know.
and I used to want to go charging and you need to believe what I believe.
Yeah. And but there was a time for that too, because it was like this place of building confidence and motivation to follow through and bring the energy current through. And then we loosen those structures, soften again. Okay. And yeah, it's a lot. It requires so much compassion and curiosity and a consistency that one has to develop the discipline and the will to fortify and move forward on a path that the entire world is not doing the same thing you're doing, right? So, as you said, the 5 or 10%, to look at that, I keep looking out the window when I do that. I'm like, I mean, most of the world that I know does not see the world the way that I do, right? There's pockets of us.
Mhm.
And how do we stay true and be learned and grow and shapeshift into all of our forms in the midst of a seeming sedentary group mass think or way of being, and still be our own heroine and stay true and anchored. And it's big work.
Yeah, it's like everything is thrown out onto the table right now,
Yeah.
like every single issue, right, that you can
Yeah.
possibly think about.
Totally.
It's just out on the table right now, which is, the definition of apocalypse,
Yeah.
right, is to lift the veil and to look at everything that's been hidden. So all the cards that you've been hiding under the table, right, are out. And not just for us, but as the collective, as our political structures, our medical structure, our educational
uh,
structure,
Race, sex, you
everything,
name it.
everybody's at the table and everyone's got to show their cards. And
Mhm.
are you working for yourself, right? Where people are falling into the me centered disease,
Mhm.
right? Of getting into greed and materialism and just trying to sell products and
Yeah.
not care about the whole, or are you, concerned about, for me, it's about just teaching people how to heal themselves. You don't need medication. You don't need all kinds of gimmicks and stuff. You already have it inside of you.
Mhm.
So we as healers have to put our cards out on the table too, to say like, this is what I stand for. This
Totally.
is
Yeah.
right now as a psychotherapist, I'm trying to bring the soul back into psychotherapy. So
Mm.
for my industry is completely confused.
Yeah.
The psychology industry was guided to do short-term therapy, cognitive behavioral, symptom management, and refer out for medication. And that's completely not effective.
Yeah. Agreed.
So when you're talking about trauma and like PTSD, and I know that there's a cure for that, that we
Mhm.
do not need to be walking around triggered all the time,
Yeah.
and medicating what our soul is trying to express to us. All of the symptoms that our physical symptoms, our emotional, mental symptoms are all signs of unhealed wounds inside of us.
Mhm.
And so when we medicate that, we're basically telling our soul to shut up.
Yeah. It is. It's just
Because
smelling,
people,
voiding.
yeah, when you're on medication, you're numb.
Mhm.
You might not feel your depression or your anxiety, but guess what? You also can't feel joy.
Yeah.
So, and I've gotten a lot of criticism about, oh, you shouldn't be against medication. Unless you're suicidal, I am against medication. There is a point where, if someone's suicidal, then yeah, let's, give some relief and get them working through that. And what I do is all the things that I teach in the golden shadow method, but I'll really get in there and start doing soul retrieval,
Mhm.
because what is manifesting is a result of tremendous amount of soul loss.
Yeah.
And this is what I teach in the transmuting triggers protocol, is how to work with small mild triggers, but then these really big ones that make you want to medicate yourself or drink or drug or numb out or avoid or get really busy, and then you stress yourself out in another way because you're so busy.
Yeah.
We have to get our hands dirty and get in there and have you have experiences with your soul to bring your soul back. And traditional shamanism, a shaman does soul retrieval for you. I teach people how to do it for themselves.
Self. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's a blend of different things that I've been shown over like the last 14 years.
Mhm.
And right now, because of what's happening and all the traumas, flying all over the place, is people really need techniques. They need help, that they need to be empowered to do this work, to heal themselves, to bring their soul back together. And I mentor people and I'm holding classes and, kind of keeping my hand in, connected to people here and there. But ultimately, we can learn to do it for ourselves. After we practice it a little bit,
Yeah.
you get the gist of it. There's a check and balance system to make sure the soul is completely retrieved.
Mhm.
And then we're back in our bodies and we're calm. And everyone that I teach this to tells me the same thing. They're like, Melanie, I feel such tremendous inner peace and to be whole again.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what we're here to figure out?
Absolutely.
Figure out who we are as a soul being and bringing all the lost soul parts back. It's not inner child work. Some of my clients have said, they've talked about it like inner child work, because we do work a lot with our inner children, because our children, that we were very traumatized as children.
Yes.
But we can also have trauma as an adult. You can have
Mhm.
a car accident when you're 50 years old and your soul split off
Absolutely.
and you're not feeling safe, and maybe you're having anxiety or maybe you're afraid to drive on the highway again. That's all soul loss. When we bring that back and retrieve the soul, those fears dissolve, the triggers dissolve, everything is gone, and you're
Yeah.
just here
Yeah.
feeling amazing and
I'm a
feeling
big fan of everything you're saying here. And I do know in my own practice, it's like, it, what's the readiness, right? There are some people that are completely still in full body trauma and they're not able to even conceptually um, to be able to do that type of work. And then there are the ones that can. So it's just nourishing what is available and what it is that you're serving. But the fact that we have it all within us, I'm a big fan of, like, I love traditional approach because I think it's really important. They hold a great, great power for this planet, like coming through lineage and holding a power for us to be able to go in at like this. It feels like a microcosm level. It's like there's so much being held, and then we have this capacity to come in and be like, boom, here is a method, here is an opportunity for you to come into closeness and relationship with yourself and do it from the roots. And that's what I like about what you're talking about, because it's not just shaking, it's not just protocols somatically that are important for certain parts of the path, but we need to bring back and restore, like from the roots, what actually has been lost. Otherwise, we're just healing symptoms and playing around with symptoms, and we're not actually resolving the core of what's going to bring somebody into health and vitality for them to stand in sovereignty and not need the medication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We don't want to walk around numb,
Yeah.
medicated all the time. That's really not any way to live. And that's not who we are. But that's what we've been sold
Yeah. And that's
by
about
some.
80% of the population.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, antidepressants and antibiotics are the 2 number 1, and pain medication actually is, like, up there and running in 3rd. But the 2 top are antidepressants and antibiotics.
Yeah.
So I do address this in my next book, in The Secrets of the Golden Shadow. I talk about trauma. I move through 3 parts: the mind, body, and then the heart and soul. And although they're interconnected, we know we can't separate them. Um, I isolate them to move through them in the book. And the book is also the year 2 program. There's a lot more in the program than in the book, though. But people can, go through it on their own as soon as I publish it.
Okay.
But I am starting to teach on parts of it. And there is a whole section on the body and the trauma that the body is going through. Like, I was
Mhm.
brought up on antibiotics left and right, like,
Yeah, me too.
since I was, like, 1.
Birth
I was always sick.
controls, like everything.
I was always sick because I was allowed to have a lot of sugar, and we
Mhm.
know how sugar is a killer.
Yeah.
Right? So I have a lot of health issues that I've been healing, and the body heals just like the earth heals, like regenerative farming, right? So the body can come back with a lot of support, with a lot of fertilizer, which are my supplements. And you always want to make sure your supplements are organic. A lot of people are taking supplements that are full of pesticides.
Yeah.
So we're just adding more chemicals into our system, which, really wreaks havoc and causes chronic illness over time. So for me, antibiotics and all of the over the counter pharmaceuticals that I was given on top of sugar and processed foods, and that created trauma for me. So I addressed that in my year 2 program and in the next book, as a trauma, chronic illness. We are sick.
Yeah, this is
We
sad.
are very sick, not just mentally and emotionally, but we have a tremendous amount of physical dis-ease going on.
Mhm.
And this is also a result of being disconnected from our soul and from the
Absolutely.
natural world, from the spirit, I'm totally open to very different religious backgrounds as long as you have some kind of faith in
Mhm.
something, more than just you.
Yeah.
When we deny that, then we really, people suffer when they think it's just, them and then lights out. We're much bigger. And so we have a tremendous amount of trauma going on that's affecting our mind, affecting our body, and affecting our soul. So I really felt compelled to address trauma holistically. That's the true holistic approach: mind, body, heart, and soul. And
Mhm.
so what I really want to do is bring the soul back into psychotherapy, helping my field, helping other therapists heal themselves, because a lot of them honestly are carrying a
Yeah.
lot of trauma, and they're doing their best, put it that way, to help others. But uh, what our ancestors gave us, the wisdom of our ancestors, needs to be remembered.
Mhm.
We need that wisdom now. of how we need to remember that we are a soul as well. And we need to get back into nature,
Ah, yeah,
right? I
for
mean,
sure.
we're disconnected from everything that heals us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me back into it's like coming back to the Orbis. Like, let's just lean into everything that you're sharing and everything that you're creating is really about creating a new legacy for humanity. So, everything, from our children to our clients, it's like bringing it's just coming back home.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and these little ones that are here now, they are coming in with their own medicine, and I know I feel like my son is my teacher, like I actually had a big shift, right before getting pregnant with him. And it was like, hey, if you want me to come to Earth to
Yeah,
hang out
do
with
it.
you, you're gonna need to make some changes.
Yep, same, same. It's
You
big.
know, I'm a homeschool mom. He wants nothing to do with mainstream. I can't pay him. He's 14 and a half now. So he went to Montessori and then he did public school for 3 months and absolutely hated it.
It's like I'm done.
And I had to make massive changes to my life to accommodate. Luckily, I have one. I mean, I can't say that everyone can do this, but I made the changes, because that's who I am. I will die for him. I will
Mhm.
do whatever I need to do. And I had started to go into private practice before getting pregnant. And I never liked being part of the system anyway. But it was really, knowing that I was going to become a mother, major shifts started happening and teachers started coming to me. And yeah, it was so that I can do what I'm doing now, which is be home with him
Mm.
and guide his soul. I have no idea where it's going. I have a kind of an idea,
Yeah.
to really help him, to teach him how to be empowered. And he does fight it sometimes, and to be here for others, work online. I work mostly online. I see very few people, in person,
Yeah.
and to be able to, form these programs, for whoever is, some people, they're like, I have no idea how I found you.
Yeah, I love that. I
It's
love
like through
that.
the ethers, it's like you got the message, the telepathic message, or something. So, but yeah, our children really need us.
Yeah.
And becoming a stay-home mom was one of the best things ever.
Mm.
I grew up in the 70s, and my mother, left the house and started working. And that was very traumatic for
Mhm.
me. And, I was born in 1970. So I grew up in the 80s, with the generation, the latchkey generation,
Yeah.
where there was no one home.
Mhm.
And so we became very resilient as a result of that, but we also suffered, and there was
Agreed.
trauma as a result of that. So again, right?
Yeah.
There's
I
there
wouldn't
it
change a
is.
thing about that. It's made us so powerful to be able to hold the line for the next generation.
Yeah.
Big medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, we
We
do. We have a strength that we have tapped into because
yeah.
running around in the woods with
Yep.
no supervision. And my husband and we sometimes we say, I have no idea how I made it alive
Yeah.
during
Same.
those years.
Same. It's fascinating.
So, and now, it's like I see these little beings, just being told what to do all the time. It's so opposite,
It
right?
is completely opposite. The pendulum is like, let's get back into center. I'm like waiting for like,
Yeah. I'm
yeah,
like, "Go get out of the house." Like, I just kicked my son out of the house. "Go get out, get outside. Go
yeah,
sit under a tree for hours. I don't care.
yeah,
Get outside." But it's so sad because there's no other kids outside. It's just
yeah.
heartbreaking.
It's
So, he's a gamer. He meets with his friends online and they play video games. And I'm like, "Okay, this is their playground. This is like, okay, you gotta like switch over to, and he loves it. He's a tech, he's probably going to go into graphic design or game design. So he's actually, he loves tech, but he also loves nature. I
Mm.
took him into New York City to go to like a museum, and he was like, I hate the city. And he's like, I like where we live, we're like in the country, sort of,
Oh, he's so
you know.
cute.
He loves New Hampshire. He loves the mountains way up north in New
So do
Hampshire.
I. He's smart.
I'm like, he loves his space.
Yeah,
So he's been homeschooled since fourth or fifth grade now.
that's awesome.
Um, and it's been so awesome being home and cooking and growing food together. He waters the plants with me and,
Love it.
takes care of things around the house. And he's like, he can do everything on his own. He's 14 and a half. He cooks, he cleans, and we have family meetings and
Love
teach
it.
him how to articulate and communicate his feelings.
Fantastic.
It's fun.
Oh,
Parenting is a trip, right? It's such a trip. It's
it
one of the
is.
most deep spiritual paths.
It is. It's such a high service.
Yeah.
Such a high divine service.
So it's been amazing. It's all been amazing. And it's not perfect. There's
Yeah.
dark, there's light, there's good times, there's, hard times. And but it all boils down to, just being grateful for being
Mm,
here on this planet, right?
I love that. Yep. No matter what is being served in any moment, there's so much opportunity and medicine.
Yeah.
Mm,
So as far as, transcending, which is my, really what I want to try and teach people is to, find that gratitude for all of it, even the trauma, and that can be really hard to hear when you're in it,
yeah.
and I know it was hard for me to hear when I was in it. You cannot see past the darkness, right? But dark cannot exist without light. Light
Mm,
cannot exist without dark. And one of my Mayan teachers said, the Mayan perspective is that the stars can't shine bright in the sky without the darkness behind.
yeah. I love that. I love that.
We need to remember that when we're going through the dark.
Yeah.
It's all temporary.
Mm,
It will change. And to be able to ask for help is huge.
it is huge.
Never, ever, ever go through dark times without mentors. I used to have like 6 mentors surrounding when I was really going through it, and it was years of cleaning out my muck. I had like 6 mentors. They all had special gifts in different ways.
Absolutely.
But every single penny I invested in my healing.
Yeah.
And now life is like beyond magical. But I had to know that I was worthy and that I deserved it. And I didn't.
Yeah.
Now I do. Now I know. Now I got to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That's
Now I'm on the
beautiful.
other side. Not to say that I still don't get hit with lessons.
No, they're
We
still
do.
there. They're just different.
Yeah. But now we understand it from a bigger perspective, from that
Yeah.
transcendental place. We're looking down and we're like, oh, universe,
Yeah.
know what you're doing.
Totally. My teacher, she's so funny. Like she's like whenever some like really, really dark like energy comes through and something big is about to happen, she's like, "Ooh, this, this is like the excitement of like, oh, there's a big power in me coming online. All right, great.
Yeah. I
About
say you're leveling up.
yeah, it's like
You're learning something,
you're about
right?
to open something for sure. So,
Yeah. I say it's like, people always understand this. Like life is like a video game, right? Once you've mastered a certain level, you level up to the next level and there's new monsters.
yeah, always.
There's new adversaries,
Yeah.
right? And so you can just be like, oh, yep, this is how life is. Life is like a video game. I'm leveling up.
Yeah.
And I can take this on and I can get past it. And, like in video games, like you get bigger.
Yes.
It's like-
So cute. Yeah.
It's you've just leveled up. You've just gotten stronger and wiser,
Mm,
right?
beautiful. Yep. That's all we're doing here in the school of life.
This
Yep.
is my perspective. I could be totally crazy.
No, I don't think you are. It's all relative and makes sense to me. I'm sure that the people that are listening will receive whatever they need. Thank you
Mm,
again so much for coming on.
thank you.
So we're going to put the names of your books and ways for people to reach you below, for anybody who wants to work with you. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate this and your time. This was
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Melanie Ryan LCSW. On Instagram, it's golden.shadow.method. And then my books are found on Amazon. Or you can contact me. I can always send you them myself. So some people prefer that. But thank you so much, Jackie Ma,
welcome,
having me
Mama.
on. It's
Thank
been
you.
fun as always.
Yeah, it is fun. Thank you for your wisdom and your time. And thanks everybody who's chiming in. And we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you.